Sri Ramnas Maharishi's views on self realization. Devotee asked, how is realization made possible? Maharishi said, there is the absolute self from which a spark proceeds as from fire. The spark is called ego. In the case of the ignorant, it identifies itself with the same some object simultaneously with its rise. It cannot remain independent of such association. This association is ignorance, whose destruction is the object of our efforts. If ego's objectifying tendency is killed, it remains pure and also merges in its source. We can separate ourselves from that which is external, but not from that which is one with us. Hence, ego is not one with body. This must be realized in the waking state. The quest, who am I, is the X to cut off the ego. The intellect always seeks to have external knowledge, leaving knowledge of its own origin. The mind is only identity of the self with the body. It is a false ego that is created. It creates false phenomena in its turn and appears to move in them. If the false identity vanishes, the reality becomes apparent. This doesn't mean that reality is not now. It is always there and eternally the same. The mind rises after the rise of I thought or the ego. Devotee asked, how to get rid of egoism? Maharishi said, if you see what the ego really is, that is enough to get rid of it. It is the ego itself which makes efforts to get rid of itself. So, how can it die? If ego is to go, then something else must slay it. Will it ever consent to commit suicide? So, first realize what is the true nature of the ego, and it will go of its own accord. Examine the nature of the ego. That is the process of realization. If one sees what one's real nature is, then one will get rid of ego. Until then, our efforts are just like chasing one's own shadow. The more one advances, the more distant is the shadow. If we leave our own self, then the ego will manifest itself. If we seek our true nature, then ego dies. If we are in our own reality, then we need not trouble about the ego. Seek your source, find out whence the thought I springs, what object can we be surer of and no more certainly than ourself. This is direct experience and cannot further be described. If the present I goes, the mind is known for what it is, a myth. What remains over is the pure self. In deep sleep, the self exists without perception of body and world. Then happiness reigns.